Hi there, this is Bob Eubanks, and you're listening to Fab 4 Free For All. But doesn't everybody?
And welcome to another edition of the Fab 4 Free For All, the all Beatles and related podcast. And I am your moderator for tonight's show, Mitch Axelrod, and joining me, as they always do, are my good friends, Tony Traguardo.
Hi, folks.
And Rob Leonard.
Hello, everyone.
And tonight we are really excited to feature someone on the show. We have just read her book. It is a really good book. It's called My Ticket to Ride, How I Ran Away to England to Meet the Beatles and Got Rock and Roll Banned in Cleveland. It's by author Janice Mitchell, and we are excited to have her here tonight. Hi, Janice. Welcome to Fab 4 Free For All.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Wow, that's more than other people are say to us, so that's good. You're off to a good start.
Thank you.
So, do we call you Jan or Janice, just so we know?
Jan is good. Yeah.
Okay, Jan. Great. So the book is actually a very easy read, and I don't say that derogatorily. I just say I sat down one day and just was so enthralled by it that I couldn't put it down. And that's a really great sign of a really good book. So I want to talk a little bit about the beginning, because I think your background, which you set up a lot in this book, is very important to the story. So can you describe growing up in the 50s prior to hearing the Beatles? What was your life like?
Well, my life was, it was a little on the rough side, because I was the oldest of three children with two alcoholic parents who basically felt that partying and drinking was more important than taking care of their kids. And I wound up as the oldest, trying to make sure that we were safe and try and make sure we had some food and try and avoid the harsh life with the parents when they would come home. They were not always, very nice to us. So there was a large element of trying to stay out of the way. Yeah. And that's what I did. So, but I loved music. But I was left alone a lot to my own devices. And one day I was wandering around in the basement of our apartment building in Cleveland, and there was a piano in a room. And I went over and I sat down, and I discovered that when you pressed one of the white keys, it made a sound. And I loved it. I found myself finding all the notes for some Shirley Temple song, and I was delighted. It took me away from my terrible home life, and being hungry all the time and wondering what was going to happen next. So music made a big impression on me. Fortunately, when I was 7 years old, my mother decided to leave us. She had some kind of side boyfriend, and they went to Chicago from Cleveland, and she just abandoned her children and her husband. So I was already staying at my great aunt and uncle's house, and my uncle Mac, who was prominent in my life, he was my only ally. He decided that I should just stay there. So that was the beginning of the good part of my life. Yeah.
Tony, you had mentioned Tony and I were talking off mic about your uncle, and Tony, you had related it to John Lennon.
Yeah, it was, Jan, when I was reading the book and you were talking about your uncle being your ally, it reminded me of John and Uncle George, Mimi's husband, being his true friend and his true ally. And Mimi was a different kind of soul than your aunt was. But it was interesting. I saw that parallel there when you talked about having that ally who you also lost unexpectedly.
Oh, yeah. He was the best person in my life ever. And, he just accepted me as a child, and we had fun and joked around and read the funnies together. And he was the school crossing guard for my elementary school, St. Anne's. So I would walk up to the corner and I'd say, "That's my uncle." I was so proud of him. And he would be crossing all us kids, and I'd be beaming with pride at how wonderful he was. And he was he was getting ready for work one morning. It was March 1963. And I heard my great aunt yelling, "Wake up, wake up." Mm-hmm. I immediately ran from my bedroom, tried to see what was going on. She wouldn't let me. Apparently, he had just collapsed and died right there.
Wow.
While he was getting ready. So,
wow.
it had broke my heart, it ripped my heart out. And because now he's gone. Now I don't have anybody. And it was very hard.
It was, I found it interesting, and Mitch and I were talking about what, my thoughts were when reading the book, is that Beatles aside, it's a sociological study. It's a sociological book about, how this affected you. And it's also interesting too, because we get stuck sometimes in that image of the 50s as always being Father Knows Best and Ozzie and Harriet and rightfully, you're telling your true story, your real story. And it pulls you out of that, that Ozzie and Harriet world and into that reality that you were dealing with in that period.
Well, I think you're right about that. And I find it, as I look back, quite shocking that children were treated that way, by two dysfunctional parents, and allowed to just fend for themselves. No one really intervening, except for my great aunt, but who did try.
Yeah.
And children just need one person to reach out and try and help them.
Right.
And that makes the biggest difference in the world. So I was fortunate. And plus, I was a tough little kid, let me tell you.
Well, now we didn't even say where you were from, though. You're from Cleveland, obviously.
Cleveland, yeah. Inner city Cleveland. I was tough.
Cleveland rocks.
Cleveland rocks.
Well, I have a question concerning Cleveland. One of the things when I started to read the book is I thought of this as sort of a side book, of Dave Swenson's book, which I'm sure you've read, 1964, 1966, when the Beatles showed up in Cleveland. He wrote a whole book about it, and I sort of see your book as sort of a side. I don't want to say sequel, but a side story to what Dave did.
Yeah,
maybe a prequel.
Or yes, and I thought about that. I was wondering, have you talked to Dave, and had you read Dave's books?
I have Dave's book, and I don't think of my book as any kind of sequel or prequel or anything like that, because
there's a lot of Cleveland in it.
But our stories are totally different.
Absolutely.
He just writes about something, and I'm telling you my true story, that nobody else has. I'm telling you everything that's a true story. That all the things that really truly happened to me hadn't happened to anybody else. So yeah, I'm aware of him, but no, it's totally different. It's two separate books.
Right.
You mentioned St. Anne's. I think that's important in the story. Not exactly St. Anne's, but a Catholic girl growing up in Cleveland, or a girl going to Catholic school in Cleveland, enjoying music. I mean, what were the restrictions put on you, if any, by school?
Well, in Catholic school, when I graduated from St. Anne's, that was elementary school, and then I went to Ursuline Academy of the Sacred Heart, all girls Catholic school. And there were restrictions on every single thing you can think of. Like, there was no talking in the hallways. Walking in the hallways, there was one single file line going in one direction and another in the other direction, with a nun stationed at either end.
Wow.
And in our uniforms, we wore blazers. Only one pocket could be open, and those carried these little white cards that were called demerit cards. So a nun didn't have to tell you what infraction you had committed. She would just simply hold out her hand, look at you in your eyes, and you knew automatically to reach in your pocket and place a demerit card in her hand. And that was it. So there was nothing going on in school except obedience. That's what it was all about.
Yeah, submission. Really.
Yes, or be punished.
Yeah.
You just had to use that pocket for something else, didn't you?
The inside pocket. Yeah, I thought that was pretty clever.
Yeah. You want to tell the folks what you used it for?
All right. So I discovered that the inside pocket of our Blazers, there was no rules about that whatsoever. So I said, I can slip my little transistor radio in the pocket and run the earplug cord up my sleeve on the inside, put the earplug in my ear, and just simply lean my head against the palm of my hand. And that's how I failed geometry.
I think that's how a lot of us failed a lot of subjects radio. Believe me, you're not the only one. And that is pretty smart. And you couldn't have gum, right? No gum chewing.
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding? No gum, no lipstick, no long hair that was untied. Skirts were below your knee. Like there was practically no laughing.
The lipstick thing though, right?
Oh, the lipstick thing. Yes. That was fun. My best friend Jerry and I, we decided that we could wear lipstick and that the nuns probably wouldn't notice. We're not in the homeroom for 10 minutes when we're called up to the Mother Superior's office. We sit down. This is big now. We know what we've done wrong and we've gotten caught, and we're sitting there. And there she is. She's like, looks bigger than life, like from outer space, with her black and white, outfit. And she just folds her hands in front of her and says, "What is that stuff on your lips?" "Lipstick, sister." "And why are you wearing that?" Because we don't want to get chapped lips." She says, "Have you never heard of candle wax?"
Oh.
I'm thinking, oh no, she's going to pour candle wax on our lips.
Oh, God. Wow.
Yeah, it was tough. She kind of let us off easy, kind of with a warning for some reason, which I don't know why. But she dismissed us.
But
like the merit card, huh?
But I did notice though, Jan, that in the book, I mean, despite all of that, you talk about your, sort of your personal relationship with God, your faith. Yeah. And I'm not giving anything away, but by the book's end, we sort of aren't sure how that will carry. And I don't want to get too personal, but how did that carry forward for you after that experience, after what went on? And, did you still have the firmness in your faith that you'd had? Because you do talk about in the book about going back and talking to God and some clear questioning. And, so was that something that, how did that change for you after that experience? Or did that stay with you after the experience?
Well, I consider myself very fortunate to have been born and raised in Catholicism, a strong faith. A lot of children don't have that.
Yeah.
And so they grow up with nothing. I feel bad about that because parents say, well, let them choose when they get older. But what happens is they have nothing to choose from. So I was very fortunate, and that's what saved me really through all of it, because I always seemed to live across the street from my school and my church, and I could always run over there. And those were the days when the church doors were open all the time.
Yes.
It was a much different era.
Yeah, sure.
So,
sure.
As most Catholics do, as they grow up, they become very disappointed in Catholicism, turn their back. But you can't turn your back very easily on that very strong spiritual connection,
Absolutely.
Which always stayed with me, always, even to this day. Yeah.
That's good to hear.
I have a question concerning, why did you wait so long to write the book? It's a great story. Why did you have to wait to this far along in your life to write the story?
I get asked that question quite a bit. So the reason is because after we returned, Marty and I, to Cleveland, where we were really punished, and we really shouldn't have been punished the way we were. They were very heavy-handed with us, but in those days, Cleveland was more or less a police state. In Cleveland Heights, where we were living, the police chief decided that, you can't have girls doing this sort of thing. Girls stepping outside the box like this, doing what they want. This was totally not acceptable. So we had to go to court, and the judge took it upon himself to fill the juvenile court jury box with newspaper men. There weren't newspaper women, but there were newspaper men, because he needed to make a statement. So we're there for our proceeding, and the judge said that he had attended that same Beatles concert that we went to, September 15th, 1964, at Public Auditorium. And I'm there sitting there thinking, oh, good, he's a Beatle fan. But that's not where we were going with this.
Mm-hmm.
He had taken his daughter there. He was shocked by what he saw. You know, all of the, I would say 90% of the crowd, girls running up towards the stage, all out of control, going crazy, doing things that nobody ever thought they would do. And he was so shocked that he made sure that he had our case. He said that any parent who did not accompany their child to the Beatles concert should hang their head in shame. And this just showed the evil, influence of rock and roll music, how it could lead to riots and drugs. And actually, he wasn't wrong. But, he pretty much made it clear, that we were to be punished. So he did the next morning. The mayor of Cleveland, Mayor Locher, piggybacked the judge and said this type of music does not serve the community. And he banned rock and roll and Beatlemania in Cleveland.
Ridiculous.
So the next day after our court date, the Rolling Stones were to appear at the Public Auditorium, the same place where the Beatles had their concert, the one that we went to. It was highly successful. It was sold out for the Rolling Stones, all 10,000 seats sold out. Because of what the judge and the mayor announced to the public, parents were not going to allow their children to go. So it was just the first few rows that were filled. And I read later on, the Rolling Stones were absolutely furious.
Of course.
Their manager demanded an apology from the judge and the mayor, which of course, do you think he got that? No, there was no apology. So besides being told at school, when we went back to school, that I wasn't permitted to talk about this with anybody, and if anybody approached me and wanted to talk about it, I was to take their name and turn their name over to the principal, which, I'm not ever doing that.
Right.
And I couldn't talk about it at home. That was forbidden. Everything about it, everywhere I went was just, I couldn't talk anymore about it. And especially after what had happened with the Rolling Stones and, Beatlemania and everything being banned in Cleveland, some people said, you just really need to put this behind you and forget about it and move forward. So I did.
Wow. So
you should probably, Mitch, I'm so sorry.
Well, hold on. Why did it take so long after that? I mean,
I see.
It's almost 60 years. I mean, you could have done for the 50th anniversary or whatever. What made you do the book at this point in your life?
I never planned on writing a book.
Oh.
But what happened was, I just got used to living with it as my own personal memory.
Right.
And I still had newspaper stories tucked away that I would look at, and I enjoyed my memories of it, and I was satisfied with that, and I thought it was enough. However, in 2016, I'm listening to the radio, and I had the same experience, life-changing experience that I had the first time I heard the Beatles sing "I Want to Hold Your Hand" in December of 1963, where I was completely transformed, became an instant Beatlemaniac. My life was never the same after that. So in 2016, I had the radio on, and there was Paul McCartney singing. He was going to be doing his one-on-one concert in Cleveland. And his voice and his song and the music just hit me in the very same way. And I said, wow, I can finally talk about my story, what I did, my adventure. Everybody's dead. Nobody cares. I can't hurt anybody.
Right.
So I'm free to talk about it.
Right.
So I did. I talked about it, told my story to somebody who said, wow, that is a great story. I got to put you in touch with my friend in Canada who does Beatle merchandising and Beatle books. And, he probably wants to hear about it too. So I told him the entire story. And he said, that's probably the greatest story I ever heard for a Beatles story. He said, all you have to do is write it down. I said, what do you mean write it down? He said, don't you understand? You have a book to write now. You have to tell your story. I said, oh, okay. So I started writing my book.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, Mitch. One thing that we should probably point out and let the fans know, because we don't want to, as I was saying to Mitch off mic, Jan, we don't want to give away the farm, but we should probably let folks know what the issue was all about. And
why don't we go slowly just through the journey? How's that?
Yeah,
because we already told the end result, but I'd like to get in again without giving away the whole farm. We could still let people know exactly what happened. So you had mentioned you were totally transformed by hearing "I Want to Hold Your Hand."
Yeah.
And in the book, what struck me, I'm from a divorced family. I'm still had a lot of love, but what struck and the Beatles were such a comfort to me, whether it was listening to them or seeing them on TV. I could always turn back to the Beatles and feel comfort. It struck me. You said something in the book about, hearing "I Want to Hold Your Hand." For most kids, I'm saying this, for most girls at that age, it was like pseudo-sexual. But for you, it really wasn't. You said that you made a great statement about, you just really wanted someone to hold your hand.
Yeah.
And that struck me so well. I mean, that they were your comfort food, I guess.
They were, and that message, it just went straight to my heart. And I just thought how wonderful that must be. I had a pretty loveless childhood. And I thought how wonderful that must be. And I'm imagining what that's like to have somebody hold your hand. And it must mean how much they care about you.
Wow.
So that's one of the things that just got to me right away about the Beatles, that and the happiness that I felt just listening to that song and listening to their music. I just felt happy and like a new person, and there's life there. And I wanted that.
What were your first impressions of each Beatle? When you finally got to see them, not the concert, but when you saw them on TV or wherever you saw them?
They were just the most beautiful people I ever saw in my life. I mean, there they were. There was four of them: John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and they were all equally as wonderful. I mean, every girl would choose one. It was just like a natural thing to do. But what, it wouldn't matter which one you chose. I remember back then, Ringo was super popular, super. And girls would walk around, Ringo for president. And Paul is so cute, and all that. And so everything about them was just incredible. Their hair was beautiful, their clothes, and plus they were just so well-mannered and so talented. And just everything about them was so appealing, and their songs were all about love and relationships, and they weren't afraid in their songs to talk about things, It was wonderful. I loved them. I loved looking at them. They were beautiful.
Since we could never have this perspective, Jen, I always enjoy hearing people who were, like young female Beatle fans at the time. But there's that idea, as you said, where you looked at it sort of, innocently. "I Want to Hold Your Hand" was really that. So all of the songs, once they start to get a little deeper about the real interpersonal relationships, did it, for a young female fan at the time, does it make you curious that you want to experience? Do you think, oh, I wish I could be with one of the Beatles. I wish I could know what this is like to share with them. Or did it make you want to think, because when you had your experiences that you have in Liverpool, when you meet a young man in Liverpool, it still seemed to have a real air of innocence to it, which is very sweet, So I guess I'm just trying to get that picture of that feeling as a young girl, and all the depth in those songs, and what it was feeling like for you as they grew up?
Well, it was really about the music.
Yeah.
How the music made me feel, just so happy. It was happy music, beautiful music, and there was nothing bad about any of it. Like you said, it was innocent. It was all very innocent. It was perfect because that was still an age of innocence.
Absolutely.
It was not the swinging 60s yet or anything like that. Most of the girls were still wearing their Catholic school uniforms, and we were just loved everything about them. And we wanted to sing their songs with them. We would make up our little stories, and it was just really adorable.
So when you heard, so when you heard "If I Fell in Love with You" and John singing it, that's me, I guess, right? I mean,
I didn't relate to it that way.
Interesting.
I did not.
The joy. It was purely the joy.
Purely the joy, and I
That's
just
cool.
wanted to go to where it happened, and where that type of music was born. I wanted to be there where it was born, and I wanted to live it as it was happening.
You wanted to go to the source. You wanted to go.
I wanted to be happy, and that's where happiness seemed to come from.
That's what it was all about.
So there was a DJ that played prominently in your story, Harry Martin.
Yes.
And when you read the book, and please don't take this the wrong way, but I didn't know whether he was. I sort of didn't always get the impression of his innocence. Even though it may have seemed innocent, looking back on him, without getting too personal, or without getting too much into it, he was there for you and he helped you in a lot of ways. But do you think he was as innocent as maybe, you might have thought he was back then when you were 16?
I never experienced anything weird like that before. But something inside me knew that there was some stuff about him that wasn't quite right. I didn't know what it was. But I don't think he was, as just, let me help you kind of guy. I think he probably had some other ideas, but I don't know anything about what those might have been at the time. But I knew that he made me feel uncomfortable sometimes. He never did anything, so it seemed okay.
But he did. So I could Tony.
No, I was going to say that was key though too. Mitch. I mean, even if he may have had some kind of idea going on in there, Jan being who she was and probably being an innocent person, and him picking up on that, it might have just made him feel like, what, I just want to help this kid and what she's dealing with. It's interesting.
Yeah, because I didn't want anything from him. It was just fun. I mean. The Rolling Stones. I mean, wow,
I was going to ask you about that next, because before you even got to see the Beatles live, you were lucky enough to see, in June of '64, you were lucky enough to see the Stones on the Mike Douglas show.
Oh my God. That was just purely a thing that just happened. I didn't even plan it to happen. I would never have known. I would be hanging out with the Rolling Stones in their dressing room at the Mike Douglas show.
That's kind of wild, because a lot of people don't even know that they were on the Mike Douglas show.
I know. They were. It was their first tour in the United States. They were on a bus tour, right? At the time.
That's unbelievable. So how'd you manage to get there, to get into that?
Well, that was Harry Martin. He told me that he said the Rolling Stones are going to be on the Mike Douglas show today. He says, get dressed up and come alone and get down here to the studio and I'll get you in. I was out the door like a shot, got down there, went in, he brought me into the studio. This was completely empty. And then he left. Harry Martin was doing a record promo at a department store in downtown Cleveland. So I'm sitting there like, wow, now I'm going to see the Rolling Stones. I had their album and I knew all their songs too. They were becoming more popular, of course. So then this gigantic man about the size of a refrigerator walks up to me and says, where's your ticket? And I said, I don't need a ticket. Harry Martin, the disc jockey brought me in here. He said, I don't care who brought you in here. If you don't have a ticket, you're out. Ugh. So he pretty much showed me the door, and I'm standing out in the hallway, just completely in disbelief that this had happened, refusing to move. I wasn't leaving. I see a door. I walk over, I turn the knob, I pull, and the door opens, and I walk in, and the door closes behind me. And I just keep walking down this narrow hallway. And this man runs up to me, and he says, "Oh, are you on the show today?" Meaning the Mike Douglas show. And I said, "Yes."
It was amazing that at that young age and at that time, you knew the two number one rules of getting around in rock and roll shows: never leave the building and always agree when someone asks if you're part of the show. That was, you hit them both perfectly, Jen.
He says, "Well, let me show you where your dressing room is." And I just follow him along. And we get to a hallway, and he points down the hallway, and he says, "Well, yours is down there somewhere. Just, you'll find it. Thank you." And I just start walking. I see, and I know I'm backstage at Mike Douglas show, and I'm looking in each room, and there's people in some rooms, and there's like big bright light bulbs, and they got snacks and pop and everything. And I see the end of the hallway, and I'm thinking, I wonder what I'm going to do when I get down there. I get to the end, and I turn to the left, look in the last dressing room, and who do I see? Bill Wyman sitting on a chair with his guitar. And he looks at me, and he says, "Oh, are you on the show today?" "No." "Are you a singer?" "No." "Are you with the radio show?" "No." "Oh, you're a fan." "Yes." So apparently I can say 2 words, yes or no. Meaning no. He invites me to come in, and I sit down next to him on his right-hand side. And I look around, and there they are. Keith Richards, Brian Jones.
Wow.
Charlie Watts. And Mick Jagger, he had placed a chair on top of a desk, and he was sitting on the chair like a king. You know, this shouldn't surprise anybody, right?
Wow.
And there I am. He looks down at me. He says, "I'm tired, hungry, sexually unfulfilled." I'm just like myself, what? I have no idea what to say. So I just say nothing. That was my best move. Say nothing.
You can't get no satisfaction.
Right?
You know, I think that's where the song came from, right? That moment.
Wait, from you? No.
But that was it. That was exactly it.
That was it.
Jan was the inspiration for this song.
That was the inspiration.
It's whoever served Paul McCartney those scrambled eggs that gave him yesterday. That was the same.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But it is funny though, because it kind of, if you think about it, guys, and and Janet, it sort of is funny because the myth was always, especially, here you were, Jana, an innocent Catholic schoolgirl, but you were also, aside from listening to the Beatles, which was, on the cusp, you were listening to those dirty Rolling Stones. And it's very funny because, we always hear the myth of, you'd never let your daughter date one of the Stones,
Mm-hmm.
But it is funny to hear that, the same way you were picking up the Beatles records, that you had gotten the first Stones album. It was just part of that musical experience at the time. And it wasn't,
I was right smack dab at the beginning, in the middle of the controversy, Beatles or Stones, Beatles or Stones.
Right.
Like you were supposed to choose, right. But I was right there.
But Bill, who, as we know later on in life, had a propensity for younger women, he actually wanted you to come. He wanted you to come on tour and be with him, correct?
Yeah, he wanted me to come with him.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. So, what if you would have went? That would have been a very different book.
Well, quite honestly, that was an impulsive move on his part. Even though I was impulsive in different ways, I was also a planner. Like, that would have required a lot of planning, to go with Bill Wyman. And I was already all set, for my other plan, much bigger.
Yeah. Wow. Well, talk about that. Because,
Mitch, it was that question I was talking to you about in the car before. I mean, Jan, it's funny. It's a hard question to try to word, but because of your circumstances, your surrounding, the things that were going on in your life, had the Beatles never existed, do you think that there still would have been, whether it was another musical experience, would there have been something that may have pulled you away anyway, to have to get away and be away from where you were and make that plan? Because, the plan was a brilliant one. You're going to go work for Epstein. That was a pretty smart thing to determine that's what you could do. But, and we'll let the book explain what happens there. But do you think you would have wanted to somehow get away anyway because of what was going on in your life?
I can't answer that question because the Beatles were the main influence. That they propelled me to feel that I could find the life I wanted to have someplace else. And I don't think anybody else could have done that for me.
Giving you that.
It's so funny because Tony was saying, and I'm giving total credit to Tony on this one, but he was saying that if you fell in love with the Four Seasons, what are you going to do? You're going to go to Jersey? I mean, I'm going to be in Hoboken. Bye-bye. You drive there. You don't have to take a plane.
Oh, that's funny.
And who knows who you would have wanted to go work for at that point over in Jersey.
Exactly. Work for Sinatra. Who knows?
Work for Sinatra.
Well, but my question is, you go to London and Liverpool, and it was part of the Beatles and the whole British invasion is that they came from Liverpool and London.
Yeah.
And it was part of the story. And I was wondering, like you didn't say, well, I'm going to go to Manchester to go see the Stones.
Right.
Because, they didn't really push Manchester the way they pushed London and Liverpool. What was the influence of those two cities on you? And back then also there wasn't an internet to go searching about where to find places to live there or hotels or whatever. So I'm just curious, when you heard about Liverpool and London with the Beatles especially, what do you think about those cities from all the way in Cleveland?
Well, one of the things that we had to do was of course, like you said, there was no technology back then. So there was no internet, there was no Google. If you wanted to find out about things, mainly you go to the library. But for kids like me, you had to get those teenage magazines. And at that time, there were Beatles special magazines. It cost more than the other magazines. They were 50 cents. Okay. So in one of the stories I was reading, I was over at my friend's house. We were, of course, listening to Beatles records. And I'm reading one of the magazine articles that said, the Beatles could hang out in Soho and no one bothered them. This was like a total revelation to me. I said, oh my gosh, look at this. How do they put this in a magazine where everybody can read it? The Beatles hang out in Soho and nobody bothers them. So I said, that's where we have to go. We're going to Soho. So that was the plan for that. And of course, Liverpool, a must, because that's where the Beatles came from. That's where they were born. That's where they grew up. That's where they learned, to play guitars and music and everything. So it had to be both.
The experience of the live concert. Now, your plan, and again, we'll let the book speak for itself in terms of the plan. We don't want to give it away because you do have a cohort that we're not mentioning, Marty, who definitely helped you financially and emotionally at that time. And I think people need to read the book because I want to focus more on you because this is obviously your story. But the experience of the Beatles in concert, you mentioned they were at the Public Arena. And nowadays, now you get on Ticketmaster, you have to wait in a queue, and for $1,000, you can get tickets. Back when I was going to concerts, and I'm 60, but back when I was going to concerts, we had to wait in line at a place that sold tickets, just like you did. And you ended up in the front row. How did that happen?
Okay, good question. So when we found out that the Beatles were actually coming to Cleveland for their, concert on September 15th, the radio station WHK was announcing it all the time. And the newspaper had an article about how you could get tickets to see the show. And what they wanted to do was to prevent some of the chaos that they had seen in other cities. They came up with a plan. You would send in a 4-cent postcard dressed exactly as they showed it in the newspaper. And then your return information on the back. You would send in your card. The card would get fed into the IBM computer, one of those giant ones from the day. And the computer would number your cards, and then it would spit out the winning postcard. And Public Auditorium only had 10,000 seats, and they had over 100,000 postcards sent in. So it was going to be tough to try and get your postcard selected. But if it did, then you would receive a letter in the mail with no return address, because they were afraid people would steal those letters.
Yeah.
And in the envelope would be a letter telling you the date and where to go to purchase 2 tickets. So I got a letter. So now that's what determined when we were actually leaving. Okay, so the plan was that I believe it was the morning of June 9th, the box office was going to open at Public Auditorium. So I said to my friend, all right, I got to be first online. And this is what my plan is. So I told her my plan for what we needed to do in order to be first online, which meant probably being one of the first kids ever to stand in line all night long.
Yeah.
First. So fortunately, there was police there, and one of the police officers said, well, there's a lot of kids here tonight. I better start taking down names. So he wrote down number 1, Janice Hawkins. That was me. So that was a fortunate move. Because
how many days before were you there?
What?
Were you there just one night before?
Yeah, just one night.
Wow, that's still, and again, you didn't have any parents to stop you, so to speak.
Well, my friend and I, we made up a little plan of deception, actually, that worked out fine for the moment, for that night.
Right. Yeah, let's not give that away. But so how'd you get the tickets? You waited and you finally got them? Because I know there was a bunch of people, like you said, online waiting too.
Well, as the morning approached, there were kids who just started pushing everybody aside. Obviously not Catholic school girls. So I said, wait a minute, this isn't fair. I got to find that policeman because I'm number 1 on the list and I need to buy my tickets first. I was very determined. I found him and I said, look, all these kids pushed me out of my place and you wrote down my name. I'm number 1 on the list. He said, yes, you are. And he escorted me over to the box office and he said, this young lady is first on the line to buy her tickets.
Wow. So
the box office lady, it seemed to take forever for her to read the letter. Like she didn't know what was going to be in it, right?
Exactly.
Then she said, well, what tickets would you like? And again, I'm appalled. Like, how does she not know? I want front row center. Okay.
What tickets would you like?
Yeah, really, seriously.
I'd like 19th row all the way on the left.
What planet are you from?
She was a Stones fan, Jan. You have to just.
Well, to be quite fair, depending on how much it was, $3 or $4. If you didn't have the extra money, you'd have to go. It was probably what she was asking was what price range,
price point. Oh my God, that's right.
Well, I was prepared for to buy 2 the most expensive tickets at $6.50 each.
Wow.
So
now
that's how it
$1,500 for front row.
That's how it happened.
Now you can't get a candy bar for $6.50 at a venue to anyone. Amazing.
And you were at one of the only shows that were stopped.
I know.
I mean, that must have been. Was it disheartening to you when they stopped the show? Did you think they weren't coming back?
Well, who I was really angry at was all the unruly girls. I couldn't believe what they were doing. Messing up everything that we had worked so hard and waited so long for.
Those public school kids.
They were public school kids for sure. Catholic school kids wouldn't act like that. Just think of the demerit cards,
Well, you should have had the nuns as the security guards. None of that would have happened.
I have to tell you, I went to Catholic high school, and the Catholic high school I went to, if that had happened at an event, people would have said, "Oh, it's all the kids from the Catholic school." That's all those boys.
Especially if you were Irish Catholic, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
So did you hear all the music, or was it just drowning out with the screaming?
Are you kidding? All you could hear was the screaming. You couldn't hear one single note.
Even up front.
We were like 10 feet, from the stage. And all we could see was the boys. Oh my God. and them singing and playing their instruments. I knew all the words to every song anyway, so I was perfectly satisfied just being that near to them.
No camera?
Well, we didn't really take pictures back then. Not like today. People take pictures of like everything, a taco on a plate. You got to take a picture, right?
That's
Nobody
very
really,
important.
very important. What I'm eating right now is very important.
Yeah.
But back then we just lived, we didn't record everything. We lived it.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Janice, when you were putting together the book, what did you come across that you sort of have gotten about your story, not just personally, but from the Beatles, being a Beatle fan or from that time?
Well, fortunately, I had, I had a lot of evidence for my story. As if you read the book, you would have seen, the headlines from all the news stories, international. Yes. So I had saved some, from back then. But then when I was starting the book, I said, there's a lot more. There has to be. And I started finding articles and learning some things that I had forgotten and some things I didn't know. And one of the things that I didn't know that came from a newspaper story from the British Library was a story that appeared over there about when my friend and I were at the United States Embassy, where we were forced to have a press conference because of the whole Beatles thing. The news people were just totally insane over there, just trying to get at us. And I was begging the U.S. Embassy guy, it came clear that we were going to be going home. Couldn't you at least just call the Beatles? Everybody, we could just talk to them on the phone. And he said, no. So what I learned was that Brian Epstein actually, and Paul McCartney was on standby to come over and say hello and goodbye.
Wow.
And the embassy people said, no, I never knew that.
Wow.
Never knew that just a few years ago. You know how upset I was, as if it was just happened, it was horrible.
Of course. Yeah.
It's a sense of betrayal, I think, in a way, I could imagine, Jen. Just from, especially, one of the really fascinating aspects of the book is the yin and the yang of how you were treated over there when your adventure came to a close versus how you were treated in your own country.
I know.
And that is just, I mean, overall, it's just a really fascinating story on so many different levels, but just to see that cultural difference there brought to the fore so much, and to then question how much of things really changed, sadly, too.
Well, also, Tony, I think, and Janice, I'd like to get your opinion on this. There's a lot of control that they're doing on you and your friend.
Yeah.
About, not seeing the Beatles or, different things with the schools. And there seems to be a control thing as well as what Tony was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they felt we needed to be punished.
Yeah.
Because girls didn't do stuff like that. But we did.
The funny thing is, and I wanted to ask you, excuse me, as soon as I read what you were planning, because you said you're a planner, and you told you planned, go in there the night before for the tickets and all that. But the plan, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I may have the date wrong, but I think the Beatles played September 15th.
Yes.
Of 64. And your plan to go to, quote, Beatleland, and we'll let the book explain that, but your plan to go to Beatleland was on September 16th.
Yes.
Right? Where'd that date come from? I knew, the Beatles had to be on tour. They were until at least September 30th or so, or the 24th or whatever it was. How did you come up with that date to leave?
The day after, the morning after?
Yeah.
Well, that's because everything was in place except for when we were leaving. And we wouldn't know that until we learned if we had, if I got my letter and we were going to be able to get the tickets, because that was not a set thing. I could have not gotten a letter. My postcard could not have been picked. And then we would have not been able to go to the concert, and we would have had to select another day. But as soon as I knew we were going, I said, well, what are we waiting for? Let's just leave the next day. So we got a one-way TWA ticket.
the fact that a 16-year-old got tickets and went to London and Liverpool at the age of 16, and nobody. I mean, people like you said. Not only did Catholic schoolgirls not do those things, people just didn't do that in those days.
Right.
How did you manage that? I mean, you must have been very grown up for your age.
Well, I had lived through a lot in my childhood, and I had to take on a lot of responsibilities and deal with a lot of stuff that most kids did not. And so I learned to be very resourceful, and very clever, and stay out of the way, and made sure that, nobody knew where I was a lot of times, because I didn't want to get hit by my mother or my father. So, and I was a pretty smart kid. I was. So
yeah, obviously.
I figured out how to, survive all of it, and come out okay, alive.
Street smarts.
Street smarts. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's amazing because, even when you were there 18 days, I believe.
23.
I'm sorry, 23 days. Still, over 3 weeks. And, the fact that you got a flat, you had everything going to get an apartment. I mean, to me, I was reading that and saying, my daughter is 18 now, and I think she's street smart enough to do that. But 2 years ago, I would have been like, no way is she going anywhere near London by herself.
Right.
And you also met a lot of people, like Tony alluded to in the beginning, that were very kind, and they could have taken advantage of two 16-year-old girls. And it seems like your adventure there was just blossoming when you got handpicked to go home.
Yeah.
I mean, the people there were, did you ever meet up again? I know you say in the book you didn't with one of the guys, but have you ever tried to look up, all the people that you met there for those 23 days?
Honestly, I wouldn't even know where to begin. It's so long ago. And it's interesting that you asked that question, because recently I was interviewed by the Liverpool Echo, a big daily newspaper in Liverpool, about the boy, that I was with, and hoping that somebody would read the story and say, oh, hey, here's Mick, or there's Mick. Hey, Janice, I remember you.
Right.
And that was the crux of the story, but it didn't happen. So I wish.
Yeah. What about Paul and Ringo? Have you ever tried to contact them and maybe meet them backstage at one of their shows? Because Lord knows Ringo is on tour every year, and Paul, every few years he comes around. So have you ever tried that?
Okay. Well, when he came in 2016 to the one-on-one concert, I did actually make it down a staircase to the actual stage. However, a teamster escorted me back up the stairs.
Oh. You had to say you were with the show, Jan. I was with the show.
Well, I tried that, but then somebody came over and he asked them, is she with the show? And they said no. And as he's escorting me up the stairs, he said, you told me you were with the show.
Where's Bill Wyman when you need him? If Bill had been there,
I know.
Bill Wyman's like what, 88 now or something?
He's old now.
He really is.
Yeah, really, but he's still going strong. He's incredible, really.
Yeah, he's got a lot of ventures going on at the moment, which is kind of cool. So I have to ask you though, we haven't mentioned Marty a lot, and Marty's a girl. Have you reached out at all? Have you tried? Has anything happened since the publication of the book?
Nothing.
Really?
Nothing.
Okay. No one's, do you think you will ever hear from her?
I doubt it.
Do we know, not to be maudlin, but do we know, Jen, that she's still with us?
We don't know anything.
Okay. So it's
we're just gonna leave it there.
Sure.
Got it.
Sure. And I have to ask this, Jen, after everything that happened, and I was talking about what had happened, with your faith, but what happened with your connection to the Beatles? Did it, despite everything and all that went on, did you follow through to Sgt. Pepper? Did you follow through to, were you still with them as a band until the breakup, or after that, was it sort of something you talk about compartmentalizing it, sort of saying, okay, well, that was the experience that happened, but how did your connection to the Beatles stay or go?
Well, my connection never left. They were always the backdrop to my life, and still are. But my life took some pretty amazing twists and turns when I came to New York City, and I became an investigator. And
ironic.
Yeah, right. And that became all absorbing for me. I mean, I was an investigator 24/7. So it was a wonderful time in my life.
There's probably a book in that, Jan. Now that you've written the first book.
That's my next book. Yeah.
Brilliant. Good. That's good to hear, because there have to be, what's the old line from the TV show? There are a million stories in the city.
Million stories in the naked city.
In the naked city. There you go.
And this is one of them.
This is one of them, right?
Janice, I got a question concerning your cover picture.
Yeah.
Where is it from? And I got to admit, this picture could have started a couple of cults, I think. So I'm just curious where the picture's from. You're waving to the crowd with dark sunglasses. Those who haven't seen it,
little
Jackie O.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, everybody says it, but I was not waving to the crowd.
Looks like it.
I am waving to someone, but not to a crowd. So what happened was when it was decided, we got to decide if we wanted to return back to Cleveland, which we did. The other option was just not very good at all. So the police had taken us to the United States Embassy, where all the arrangements got squared away. And then the embassy had an embassy limo was driving us to Heathrow Airport. And they were driving along this, windy path to try and avoid all the news people. I mean, we call them paparazzi now, but they were not called paparazzi then. But there was loads of paparazzi, like everywhere. We couldn't get away from them. But this one photographer on the back of a motor scooter managed to get up to the side of the car, the side that I was on. He's calling out, Janice, Janice, and he's got his camera up. And I just turn and smile and wave, and he got that great shot.
And where'd you get it? Was it published somewhere?
Yeah, it was in the news a lot over there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing stuff. I mean, it is kind of cool when you go through all when you go through the book, you do publish a lot of the headlines and all that stuff. Yeah. I mean, I know not to sound like, you're any egotistical at all, because you sound very humble about this stuff. But I know if that happened to me, I'd have that plastered all over my walls, because it's kind of cool, even though even though there was like international manhunt out for you, or in this case, a woman hunt. But quite frankly, it must have been exciting, even though, the end result was not what you wanted.
Yeah. Well, we didn't even know that anybody was looking for us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Until we got to the police station. That's where Bobby said to me, well, we had a pool going for you. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we would all put money in the pool that would go to the first officer who found you. Oh. He said, so the officer that found you is going to get a lot of money.
Wow.
And then I said, well, I don't understand. What do you mean? He said, what do you mean? What do I mean? He said, don't you know that everybody was looking for you, including the Beatles? And I said, no, why were they looking for us? He said, pulled out some stacks of newspapers and showed me anyway, the newspaper stories. He said, you two are VIPs. And he said, we never had VIPs like you here before. We were just treated like royalty at the police station. It was incredible.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I would think that did the thought come to you just with regards to school, just the truancy aspect, that they were going to sort of get on to something with regards to that?
I knew it was going to be bad when we got back.
Right.
That's all I knew. I knew it was going to be bad.
But as you said, you were playing it, which was the most fascinating part. And this is something that, is key to the book. You were playing it with the thought that, maybe we won't have to go back. And, And that was kind of,
That's why we bought one-way tickets.
One-way ticket. That's it. One-way ticket to ride, basically.
Right. It's the, I still, when you're in the park or I think you were by the bridge or the tunnel, wherever you were, I'm sorry if I don't remember right now, but when you got picked up by the police, the bobbies, the one bobby, I often wonder, and I don't know if you still wonder, there must have been other American girls over in London that, that looked like you, or how did they know, I know there were pictures, but, you weren't, it wasn't like you were, special, so to speak. You just, they picked you out and you just got dragged back, which is kind of weird that they just found you, isn't it?
Well, there was no pictures until close to that time point. Yeah, they sent them over from Cleveland Heights, and then they posted them at every police station.
And Scotland Yard, right?
Scotland Yard, yeah. The eagle eyes of the yard, you can't get away from them. They were very sharp.
Great train robbery. How's that going, guys?
Yeah. By the way, Janice, for those who don't know, this is a podcast, but we're also doing a Zoomcast. Introducing the Beatles in the background, is that an original one from '64? the record behind you, or is that just a screen?
Which one?
Introducing the Beatles.
Oh, that's my original. Yeah.
That's the original one from 1964.
Beautiful.
That's mine. I love it. That's my actually my favorite album because I love every song. I know. Weird, right?
No, not at all. Everybody, listen. Every 3 seconds, I can tell you my favorite song is "Help." 4 seconds later, I can say it's something else. So, again, I could love introducing the Beatles, and then I could love the White Album. So, kudos to you. I love that. That album is so. Again, I think that goes back to the innocence of everything.
Yep.
That album is so innocent and so pure and so full of energy and joy. And there's nothing like listen, the White Album's great, but it's got its issues, but that is so joyful, like most of their first few albums, that why wouldn't you just love it, right? Why can't it be your favorite?
Yeah,
I love it.
Well,
love every song on it. Yeah.
You're going to be, you told us you're going to be at the International Beatle Week in August of 2022, which is amazing. We saw you at the fest. I hope you had a good time there in New York. I want to just let people know where to get the book. So I'm going to tell the title again. It's My Ticket to Ride, How I Ran Away to England to Meet the Beatles and Got Rock and Roll Band in Cleveland, a true story from 1964 by Janice Mitchell. Where can people get the book, Janice?
Well, I think you can get it in any location on Amazon. Also Barnes & Noble, barnesandnoble.com. And also a website, mytickettorideBook.com, that takes you straight to my publisher where you could get an autographed copy.
Great. Very cool.
And then I have a webpage, janice-mitchell.com. You can read more things. You can see a lot of pictures on there, and you can message me if you like. I'll answer you too.
We will put the link to that on our YouTube video for the show. So you may watch out. You'll get at least 10 people from our listeners. I'm just kidding.
Well, I also have to say, the book's been out for a little while now. I smell movie out of this book. Has there been any talk?
Yes, there's been talk.
Is it real talk, or is it just talk?
It's real talk.
Beautiful.
Wow. You know who's going to play you?
I don't know. You know who? Did you see the movie yesterday?
Yes, we did.
Sure.
Girl, what's her name? The girlfriend?
Oh, Lily James.
Yeah, she's my choice. Yes, if I could have a choice.
She's British, but she does play American.
I know. I think she's just perfect, but
she actually just played Pamela Anderson in the Pam and Tommy story. So if she can play Pamela Anderson, she can play you.
I love her. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool. We can't wait for that.
I have no say in it. I'm just saying that somebody asked me, and I said, yeah, I would love. She's my favorite because I can't think of anybody else I love more than her as far as a young girl goes.
Well, I'm hoping that the movie comes out because I'll be honest, the book was fascinating, and it's funny because I told people, I said the Beatles aren't even in the book, but you just have to keep reading it because it just grabs you in. And that's what I love about this. There's a million books. Well, I exaggerate, but there's thousands of books on the Beatles. There really are. And you know that, Jen. But when your story is yours, and it's just purely yours. And I love that because it's not anybody else's except obviously Marty, but it's your story and nobody can take that away from you. And it's so different than all the other, as you say, maybe just informative books telling about, something, a fact or anything. But this is a great story. I really hope it does go to movie because I think it would make a really good movie. That's a great question, Rob, because I do think it would be fascinating.
There's just one quick thought before we go, Jen. And I can't remember if you touched on this in the book, but your relationship with it would be your cousin. Did that shift when you came back? Because you were a different person, really. When you came after 23 days, you came back a different person, really. There's no way you couldn't have been. And with what you went through when you got home and all of that. And it seemed that there's a little bit of an empathy. There's a little bit of something that comes from your cousin in the last encounter that you talk about with her in the book. And how did that proceed going forward?
Well, it was a mixed bag because the household was very different because now my uncle was gone.
Of course.
And my cousin sort of took it upon herself to be, the taskmaster, but yet I think somehow she was kind of amused by what I did, which I found very confusing because she was so mean. Can you be mean and amused at the same time?
Yeah.
Obviously.
I guess so. Terrible.
Wow. So whatever happened to the rest of the family before we go? I mean, do you know?
Which part?
Is everybody gone now? I mean,
yeah. They're gone. Everybody's gone.
Wow.
But as
how are you doing psychologically in terms of that? Do you harbor any ill feelings towards how you were handled as a kid, or have you gotten way past that?
Oh, I've gone way past that because I feel that what happened to me as a child, it was meant to be, and I was able to use it, to create a lot of, interesting adventures for myself. And also, as far as my investigations go, I was pretty fearless, and the kind of people that I would interview and the places I would go, I was very highly independent always. I worked undercover, and I was fearless about that.
Wow.
So I could go where, no person wanted to go, and I was fine with it.
Janice just said that she was with the show, or she dressed up as the Mother Superior, just to always.
Yeah, whatever you got to do to get the job done.
Well, the book is fantastic, and we really appreciate the time. And again, we'll put up all the links to where everybody can get the book, and it really has been a pleasure. So we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I mean, I'm just surprised and delighted to be here, and I'm happy that you enjoyed the book and that you liked it. I'm happy about that. Makes me very happy, to know that.
Oh, please, I know our listeners are going to pick it up and enjoy it just as much as we did. Believe me, and we'll make sure they do. So. Anyway, so for Fab Four Free for All, this has been Mitch Axelrod, your moderator for tonight's show. Joining me, as they always do, have been Tony Traguardo.
Night, folks.
And Rob Leonard.
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you, Janice.
And author Jan Mitchell. It's been a pleasure. We really appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. You take care.
You too.
Thank you, Jeff.
Fab Four Free for All was edited and produced by Tony Traguardo at Word of Mouth Studios in Westbury, New York.
The opening and closing theme is My Dolly by the band The Badge, featuring longtime listener Jeff Slate, available on its debut album Digital Retro and recent Best Of compilation, as well as from the Fab 4 Free For All website.
Thanks for listening to Fab 4 Free For All.